My name is Idan Avitan, founder of Growee. Welcome to my podcast. In this episode, I've traveled all the way to Fresno, California to meet one of the key pioneers of RDWC, Mr. Daniel Wilson. He is the founder of Corn Culture, an incredible business visionary, inventor, and an amazing person. And we are live, I think.
I feel very alive right now. Yeah.
So, Daniel.
Greetings.
Do you like it?
Yeah.
Do you like the name?
I
have
do.
to say that Daniel is one of my favorite prophets.
You know what? I'm hoping to learn a little bit during our discussion, and I'm looking forward to kind of exploring some of the different topics we were going through our discussion, and looking forward to sharing what we can about what we do.
I think that current culture was one of the things that when I saw it, it just blew my mind, to be honest. Like every grower at the beginning, you start with just buying buckets.
Yeah.
Right? Filling them with water and then trying to figure it out. And I was always hoping for someone to make something that will become like an industry standard. Something that everybody will use. It will be nice. It will look good. Like the black and white thing.
Hey.
I'm all about black and white.
Yeah.
So when I saw it, it was just, wow.
Thank you. Thank you.
And the first time that I saw it was by a customer of ours that was using it. And then I said, okay, I have to contact these guys. But then me and Karen, we were in MJB's like a couple of years ago in Las Vegas. And I remember Karen told me, look at this guy, like the tallest guy. If there is someone that you cannot miss in MJB's con, it's you. Right?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm trying to make it a little less of that by getting some weight off. But, other than that, just from a vertical standpoint, I'm pretty easy to spot in a crowd. But thank you for, your kind words as far as creating an industry standard. I mean, I think one of the things that I like the most about, I would say gardening in general, but specifically hydroponics, is that it's very well suited for people who are creative. Right. And so if you have a basic idea of what it is you're looking to accomplish, there's a lot of great ways to go about doing it. And I've always felt like there's nothing quite as dynamic as hydroponics when it comes to executing ideas. And so for some people, it's making something as complex as possible. And, once that works, it's fantastic. But what we've found is over the years of developing things that the end game is simplicity. And so pretty early on, we were really looking at kind of like, hey, how can we make something that's easy to set up, easy to operate, give somebody the outcome that they're looking for, and they can repeat that process. Because as with all success, specifically when it comes to cultivation, it's generally not a one-time and quit situation. You really want to find something that you can then repeat. And repeat and refine. And so, that was kind of part of what drove us towards where we're at today, and so looking back now into 1999 was when we opened a hydroponics store, and the kind of, I guess you'd say everything kind of is cascaded from that point in the direction, and we're here now.
So 1999.
Yeah.
You had like a hydroponic shop. Did you plan on building your own kind of a branded system or design system, or it was just you were feeling the pulse?
Yeah, that's a great question. So, like many out there, I was attracted to cultivation in the 90s, and at the time, 97, doing some hydroponics, and and it wasn't quite as widely accepted at that point. So things were a little more clandestine. And living in Fresno, my wife, girlfriend at the time, was a plant science major at Humboldt. We, kind of were on parallel paths, doing our own thing. I was going to university. I'd made it all the way to being a senior, interested in geology. But along the way, I kind of started to stray and find myself interested in becoming an entrepreneur. And it wasn't that, I feel like especially these days, there's a lot more like, I want to be an entrepreneur, but it was like, I don't really have a great idea of what it is I want to pursue. It doesn't seem to be anything that I'm studying in school. And, given my interest, what if we had a place when we were selling plants? And so the, I'll use air quotes, hydroponic store that we began with was really just this small 1,500 square foot building. I'm not proud to say, but the reality was it had rats. It had different things going on, and it wasn't in the best part of town, but it was in a part of town that things like that could happen, right? And when I say that, small shoestring businesses. And so our focus when we started the business was selling exotic houseplants, which was fantastic. I mean, we had, without a doubt, probably the best plant selection, certainly at that time. And we sold organic plant care items, and in there evolved into hydroponics, right? So it was some things that we practiced, but it wasn't something that we immediately were like, hey, we need to start offering hydroponics. And so during that time, I was without home, and so I found myself living in the back of this place.
Wow.
Yeah, and which wasn't glamorous, right? But it was a necessity. And so during the first years of development, I would say we certainly not champagne and caviar. But ultimately, we started growing a business. It was known as Tower Indoor Garden. It was in the Tower District, and we focused on indoor gardening. And as we developed that business, we really just started to layer in hydroponic systems. And so, gosh, they're one of the great companies of all time in hydroponics in North America is General Hydro. So we had General Hydroponic systems. I would say we probably had 12 different types of systems. American Agritech, which became Botanicare, we had systems of theirs. So we were doing drip, NFT, ebb and flow, water farms, all these different things. And American Hydroponics, a great company. Michael Christian, a big influence on us. I've had the pleasure of relating to Michael Christian, but we had NFT systems, and so we were doing it, right? We were walking the walk, and through there getting a lot of experience. And I'd have to say, I have to give it to the water farm for to this day still being just a fantastic system, right? But at that time, it was the thing that drove necessity is the mother of invention, right? And so as we were practicing this, I found myself frustrated with the fact that the water chemistry in each of those buckets could vary. And so we're just like, gosh, it really would make sense if it circulated. And that is kind of what then prompted the, I guess for lack of a better term, invention, essentially, of what we then evolved into our own system. And so that became the undercurrent, subcurrent culture. We ultimately ended up getting patented. During that time, there wasn't as robust of an industry to service, nor was there an appetite for young, upcoming companies with new ideas. That it was kind of I don't want to say it was a little bit of an establishment. All due respect to General Hydro, I don't think we were on their radar at all. We weren't approaching them going like, hey, we can make your system better. That wasn't even a thought on our part. A, I don't know that would be the case, but B, we started to identify that like, hey, like if we source these buckets and we can put some plumbing together, and we know how to take people's investments and give them a return in terms of products and support and service. And so I would say organically that ended up blossoming into offering a kit system, right? Something that somebody could purchase, pull out of a box, follow some instructions, set up, right? And then reliably grow plants. And so that's ultimately where we found ourselves becoming current culture. Somewhere in between that point, I should say the inception of Tower Indoor and then current culture becoming something. We opened an organic nursery that sold organic groceries, and we're doing too many things, right? And like you and I were talking about earlier, you're just like, we could do that and we could do that, and just ended up kind of face planting emotionally ended up having our son Satchel while we were opening this nursery, and just getting sick from stress. And so we ultimately found ourselves going like, what is it we need to focus on right now? And that became Current Culture, and that was in about 2004. So, fast forward to now. It's 20 years later.
Wow.
Yeah.
So 2004, you have like your own, let's say, not final product, but a product that is well made together, and then you are working on a patent on that.
Yep.
So, and I do have to say, at one point in the US, they had like, I don't know, 2,500 hydroponic shops. I'm talking about like the good days before 2018.
Yeah.
So they had something like around that. How many people took it one step further and just develop a product like you? Not a lot. So what do you think was it's not, I don't think it's like, it's an immediate incentive. Maybe it's something that is hard-coded.
Yeah.
So what do you think was the code?
I think a lot of it is, the term isn't ignorance, but it's when you're not exactly sure of how unlikely something is to work, right? And so I think that part of it was trudging forward in pursuit of something you were passionate about rather than rationalizing whether or not it was a good idea. In fact, that probably is part of what many of our businesses over the years fell into that category, was like, hey, that sounds like a hobby. Is that going to make money? With this particular product, I think for us, it just kind of, there was a vacuum that pulled it. It was at the right time. Like you said, there was more hobby gardening. What we happened to have was something that was well suited for that. It was an uphill battle because though there were a lot of hydroponic stores, they were all kind of in the model of distribution. Like we buy from a distributor. Here are these said products that are staples, and making your way into that. It's ignorance is bliss. And so we just can continue moving forward. And then one of the big breaking points for us in terms of the systems getting out into the world beyond our immediate kind of ecosystem was the forums. Right. And now, that was before there was Instagram and the different things like that, but there were these forums. And so what we had is we started seeing our systems make their way onto these forums, and then the discussions would ensue, and the mud would be slung, and these different things would happen. And so, it's like, hey, this is, RDWC, but like, oh, I hate it. And another person's like, I think it's the best. And what I noticed, I observed there was a reason that we needed to be in that conversation. And an important part of that was that to operate recirculating deep water culture, at least our version of it, it necessitated things that were different from what people were doing. And so specifically water management. And so in our application, you really needed to be running quarter or half strength of what everyone was doing. This was during a period where there was a very high EC emphasis. So people were like using very high fertilizer levels. They had certain practices, and when they would apply them in our application, it would crash and burn for a variety of reasons. And so being out there in the conversations became important. And so I found myself on these, kind of not necessarily like, hey, we're Current Culture. It was more like the moniker I went under was You See Me Now, right? And being in conversations to be, provocative in some cases, kind of defend ourselves from a third-party standpoint, but also be part of shaping the communications to make sure that somebody had some level of insight that they could follow, whether or not you bought into it or not. And so that helped then proliferate us past the immediacy of our region, and it kind of ended up continuing as cultivation became further accepted and the scale grew. We continued being a part of that, which we're very fortunate for, and we value, and so I would say probably about 2010 is when it started getting a little more serious. 2012 we introduced Cultured Solutions, our fertilizer, and again now it's kind of like a slip and slide to now. All of a sudden it's 2024.
Wow.
Yeah,
it's moved so fast. But I think that what it was unique about you is also the ability to build the product. Like a lot of people, they have ideas, right? But not a lot of people have the ability to really build the product. You talked about like filing the patents and finding the way. And how did you learn all of that?
Yeah. Well, I think that the term I was looking for earlier, but I couldn't find, was naivety, right? And so it was naivety that drove. And then, you know, you're an entrepreneur, you know, you can appreciate that as you need to learn something, you then assimilate that information. And so, you know, our first patents, our first patent attorney ended up being an alcoholic and blew 4 years not filing properly. But we figured it out and changed to another patent attorney that ultimately ended up taking us like 7 years. Does that matter that we got it? We feel like it did because there were larger companies that could have been predatory to our idea because we'd not yet established that we're associated with this, you know, and so and then also just great people along the way that you run into that you're able to convey your vision, right? You need to share your vision with the right people so that if they have something to contribute or some guidance to offer you, you can be there to uptake it. And so that's kind of part of how those things fell into place. I mean, as I spoke to you earlier about, we make our products in the United States, you know, primarily in California. So it's having our molds, having injection molding partners, having thermoforming partners, creating relationships so that our capabilities are not limited by our own capacity, but through the relationships that we've created, right? And so that's really kind of how it all fell into place. And then we were able to become increasingly more capable as time went on. And so rather than just getting off the shelf components and drilling holes in them, we're creating injection molds and designs and further, you know, what would be better? What's the next thing? We're big believers in incremental movements. Right. So it's like you need to identify where you want to go, but you need to kind of then figure out the steps, the phases to get to that place. And that's very much how got where we are now, is we just accepted the fact that you don't get from point A to point B. There's many steps in between that.
So you mentioned General Hydroponics, and you refer to it as a great American company.
Yes. That
were in our industry. When you said about like people that you can talk to and nice people, this is what you felt when you were engaging with them?
Yeah, generally yes. They were a little bit beyond reach, and when I say that, it wasn't that they weren't a group of down to earth people, but again, you know, and we can appreciate it as we moved on. You only have so much bandwidth, right, to interact with people, and you know, they were, you know, so well established, and you know, the nutrient and the systems and everything. And now, having said that, they were pretty early on in the process, the first ones to tell us, like, you guys are really just sitting there making hydroponic systems. Like, what are you doing? You know? And so, you know, what you take with a grain of salt, because you're like, oh yeah, that's kind of our thing. And then they're like, oh, good luck with that. You know, you're like, oh my God, these guys are telling us that.
Andy.
Yeah. And as I mentioned earlier, like, we actually found several mentors through the years, not in a comprehensive, like, we're mentoring you, but people who came through and gave us insights that became invaluable, and not the least of which being Michael Christian, who is the founder of American Hydroponics. I mean, just what I would consider a very, like, cornerstone person in the industry. And he was very helpful, not just from a business sense of like, here, you should be running this pipe to there. It was never about that. It was more about, here's how you need to carry yourself. Here's how you need to introduce conversations. Here's how, you know, because there were some times in there where we're just struggling, you know? And so when I would approach him in a certain way, he was real about it. Like, hey, you seem desperate. Hey, you seem distressed, you know? And I think finding those people in your life who will give you that insight, not just leave you with it, but tell you, hey, maybe you should look at it through this lens. It doesn't matter what the discipline or the specifics of your business is. That is universal umbrella information that then you can plug in and apply to the day-to-day.
Yeah, I think it also can get really lonely as an entrepreneur, right?
Yeah.
So when you're doing everything yourself, go to sleep, but you're dreaming about a company if you want it or not. And then you wake up in the morning and you're thinking about the issues and all the problems. And then when you are in the early days and you have like a small company, you really need just someone to talk to, you
Yeah.
know. But having someone that has the feedback, that can tell you what you said, I think this is it's the most valuable thing that you can get as an early days entrepreneur. For me, what it was that it took me about a year to build a prototype, and throughout the year, we talked about it earlier. My background is in robotics, so I don't know anything about. Back then, I didn't know anything about like building a company or spreadsheets or managing investment and all of that. So I found I was working for a big medical kind of equipment startup, and I just reached out to the CEO, and I told him, listen, I don't know anything about what I'm doing. I know who I'm building it for. Like I know who's going to be the customers because I talked to a lot of them and I know what is the issue. But besides that, turn it into a business, I have no idea. And he's been like a mentor and a friend since then. And I think finding these people in your life that can give you advice and guide you is like the basic thing that you can do as an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
This
that's
is
a
how
good
it was
point.
for me. And I told you I'm not biblical, but there is a saying like in the Bible that you need to find yourself a friend and a rabbi. A rabbi, like not as someone that will guide you spiritually.
Yeah.
That's what it said. So I'm all about that. And did you ever thought it will become that big?
Well, I guess it's all a matter of opinion in regards to, like where it's at relative to definition. I do want to kind of move back into like the early times of this and just give a shout out to a couple people, a couple more people, and really like a top of list is my wife and business partner, Sherry Wilson, and she, man, just such a bright person. Again, just so highly qualified and kind and special. And I just have the pleasure of having her in my life every day. We wouldn't be where
That's
we're at
beautiful.
now. Yeah. And also a man named Christian Long, who came into my life pretty early when we had the shop. And, part of life is identifying the value and beauty in other people, right? And I've been really lucky in that respect. It's a part of why we even exist today is we're comprised of really amazing people.
Wow.
Yeah, and so Chris was one of those people along the way, and to this day, like we're friends, and he contributes to what's going on here. But he played an instrumental role from the beginning, on until just a few years ago when he carried on to have a family and do some other things. But those types of people matter a lot, and then more broadly, mentors and things like that. As far as expectation, I try to manage that. I try to manage expectation because what you can do is you can achieve pretty amazing things, but if you've set an expectation beyond that, you find yourself rhetorically disappointed. So figuring out how to measure those two, or what would you say, deploy expectation and achievement kind of in a relative way. I think, now I'm in my early 50s. I would say when I was in my 30s, I was not as clear on that and, more kind of consistently disappointed, when it was just like you need to take a step back and kind of look at where you're at and take stock of it. So I guess I'm not surprised where we're at. I only say that because it wasn't so much that I expected it. It's just that it's been really hard. Like the work and disappointment and issues and problems and successes, that soup, that cauldron, has been a lot. And so nothing came easy. And that's why I'm not surprised. It's like, well, God, I would have guessed it would be easier than this, like this is terribly hard. And so fortunately, again, it's like who you choose to do business with over the years and be part of your inner circle or come across, like we've just been really fortunate. Yeah.
Wow. When you say like pouring in all of this hard work and years, and every time that I have this conversation with someone, he's always mentioned that he knew that it will pay off because all of this hard work that he put in. So you're the second person that is saying it to me this week, and we haven't even talked about that before. So what do you think need to be like the quality, or as an entrepreneur, what do you think like you have to have in your mind? Because some people would say you need to be optimistic. Some people would say you need to be pessimistic. So always prepare for the worst. And
yes, all of those things. And I think pragmatism is really important, right? Optimism to the extent that you can see success, right? Pessimism and that you better figure out where things could go wrong. That way you can put some attention to it preemptively, or at least just not be shocked if something does go wrong. But, ultimately quality, resilience. What would you say? Being devoid of entitlement. I think these days, it's not to get soapboxy right now, but I feel like entitlement rules the day. People have an expectation for something they should have, right? And I think from an entrepreneur standpoint, if you're looking for an instant result, somewhat what we were talking about earlier, where there's the projection of success, and it can be, what would you say? It could be prompted by false growth. And let's tie this back into horticulture. What we see is you can flush growth in a plant, and it seems exceptionally vigorous, but quite often it's brittle. Growth. It's like if you have too high of ammoniacal nitrogen in the fertilizer, you see what looks to be just effervescing growth, but it's more prone to get pests. It's more short term. It's more likely to have deficiencies, and so I think that being a part of it is just like sustainable growth, expectations that are reasonable, keeping yourself in check when you start getting in your feelings. Which I think being in your feelings is important. It's just like keeping it measured, and then just like be mindful of what your goal is. Have a mission statement, kind of what we talked about earlier with like what are your intentions beyond a sale, right? Like, if we're doing great sales, like we're successful. Are you? If that's the measure of your success, you are.
This is how the market, at least the investment market measures you.
It's difficult.
Like what is your growth rate? And I think also this, I'm not sure this is like the measurement that you need to take. For me, it was always about just building a good product. People are paying us a lot of money.
Yeah.
And we need to provide them with something that will be worth their time and their money. And hopefully we'll save them time and give them good results. But I think it's our duty to build them something that they will like. So, being said that, earlier you showed me some of the new things that you are working on. Do you want to...
I do, but I want to ask you this first. Like, what do you think is an instrumental quality for an entrepreneur?
I would say definitely resilience. And being thankful for the things that you have.
Yeah.
So if someone is helping you, if someone is giving you an advice, and even yourself, just being thankful for what you have, because you can lose it in a minute.
Yeah.
Right? Everything can go down. You can have like a world pandemic. You can have other things that is happening. Something can happen to you. So I think just every year or every couple of months when I'm doing the annual investor meeting, it's always about just thanking everyone.
Yeah.
And for what we achieved. So definitely resilience, thankful, and have the ability to change.
That's a big one.
Yeah.
So, that's a good point.
Not only products change, but people also change. So you need to change as a person. And that's where my wife is also my business partner, Karen, as you met her in MJ BizCon. And I think one of the things that I learned from her is that she has the ability to go into a room and just be friends with everybody. Okay? And I'm like the opposite. If I go to a party, I will be the guy who is, hanging on the wall and drinking beer and not talking to anyone.
Yeah.
So having the ability to learn from people that you work with. So I'm trying to learn from her to be more, to engage more. And think it's about bouncing back, right?
Yeah.
Because everybody fall.
Yeah.
But can you bounce back? And also, you probably had it. You talked about companies that told you this is what you do.
Yeah.
So having this kind of a chip on your shoulder.
Yeah.
I'm gonna show them.
Yeah.
I'm gonna show them.
All right.
I'm gonna keep all the emails of all the investors that tell me no. They told me no, and I'm gonna stick them in their face. So I'm not saying this is my goal, but having this kind of a drive of a little bit of it's not anger, but something that drive you.
Yeah.
At least for me, but I'm in the early days, so it's not like
yeah. Well, you
past that.
You have many life experiences to reflect on. I think the other thing I'd say is end it with as far as qualities is the ability to view problems as opportunities, and then starting to desensitize yourself, basically detach your well-being from problems, which is not easy to do. And I have not figured out how to do that.
Yeah.
But it's not just seeing closed doors as a closed door as like, what's the answer to open this? And by all means, that isn't to say like push boulders uphill or do things that are counterintuitive, but you've got to view something as that's where a little bit of business opportunities lie in the places other people don't want to go. And I think for us, we've lived in that space for a long time. I mean, we currently exist in an industry which is dominated by drip irrigation, and we've continued to stay in water culture, right? And let me tell you this. Especially being someone who's an avid gardener, grew up on a dairy, we farmed. Wow. It was so I derived a lot of work ethic from there, but and also ingenuity in that you're out in the country and you have X amount of things in a pile to build stuff out of, right? But you've got to be adaptable, as you spoke to. You've got to be ready to do those things and make the most of a scenario without spinning your wheels in the wrong direction. So back to your question. Yeah, we've spent many years defining ourselves, I think, in the minds of the consumers very appropriately, that we are a recirculating deep water culture based company. And as I said, there's that isn't exactly the most adapted cultivation style. It is a subset within hydroponics. We term it more within water culture, so specifically our goal is to grow without the necessity for substrate, be that even a grow rock. Right now, our approach, we have just roots growing right into water, aerated water. So fantastic. And we've kind of, we are probably the most aware of all of the issues that can occur when that happens, like we better be, right? And the challenges that come with that and the successes that go with it. What we can say is what we're seeing in the industry right now, given the struggles that certain markets present, with it being like what cultivators can get in terms of the dollars per pound or units, and being a challenge, is it seems as though water culture is defining itself as the most premium flower on the market. And so as the challenges for different cultivators exist, for those cultivators who are succeeding in terms of their output, doesn't necessarily equate to success, in that you may end up with a commodity rather than a premium product. And so we may have just been kind of stumbled into this, but what we found is that there are more cultivators moving towards outcome driven scenarios. And so rather than like, hey, what's my lowest cost of production? What's the easiest thing to automate? What is everybody else doing? Which is not a bad point of reference, especially in farming. We're right here in the San Joaquin Valley. I mean, farmers will repeat what the next guy's doing if it works. That's a great philosophy. But, we are outliers in that regard, and we've kind of had to learn many things the hard way, but we've become aware of some of the things that work. And what again, we've come to find is that premium flower is produced in these methods, right? And so we're now experiencing cultivators having successes in markets that are challenged, and that's great, right? So for us, we're like, wow, this is fantastic. Like we need to get more people into this, but the reality of it is it's not necessarily for everyone. You have to pick cultivation styles that work for you, right? It's just as much as something could give you the outcome you're looking for. I think I drifted off the topic or the question that you asked me. So, but ultimately, as we're moving forward and kind of putting methods out there and supporting growers that, in our opinions, are amongst the the winners of markets, we're also continuing to assess how that stacks up with contemporary issues, not the least of which being water. Right, we're right here in California. It's a very hot topic around the world. I mean, the region that you're from is very important, right?
2/3 of Israel is desert, so yeah.
And it's one of the reasons it's such an innovative, agricultural mecca, right? Is that you when you're forced with challenges, you find yourself coming up with solutions. And so part of what we are doing is continuing to try to do a better job of supporting we've just been so fortunate to work with such a myriad of amazing people, be it from growers in tents or all the way up to facilities, right? And I'd like to think we're doing our best with everyone. I mean, we certainly are learning every day and from the people we work with, and hopefully sharing some information ourselves. But we're also charting a course for what jives with the things that we see as important. And along those lines, we recognize that water culture isn't going to fit into every situation. And then we, as a company based here in California, are on the front lines of scarcity. And when it comes to water, as far as, and regulation for that matter, right? So we know that what we see coming for cultivators is there's more regulatory issues when it comes to the inbound, but also the outbound, right? So if it's, how are you dealing with the waste streams coming out of your facility? How are you managing your water? Like, what do you have a remediation process? Like, what is your usage? And so it will become more stringent as time moves forward. And so we've, about 8 years ago, we started developing some high pressure aeroponic methods that, it took a while. We weren't on the hard charge. We don't have, like a robust Boeing type, R&D facility, but, continuing to make observations got us to the point where we ended up having something that we felt we could form into a product. And so about 4 years ago, we introduced our high pressure aeroponic propagation systems. And, with the idea that we're going to be able to get this out there, it's certainly something that's useful for people. We can make observations based on the shorter cycle of time that the plants are in there. It's not an entire 60 to 80 day cycle they're in there. And, we'll make some observations. We'll see if this is something we can continue pursuing. So here we are. And, probably about 3 years ago, we started working on a cultivation approach for high pressure aeroponics that, we're on the precipice of rolling out now. And we've been playing it pretty close to the chest as far as what we have, for a few reasons, one of which is we need to be where we're at. And as you and I spoke about earlier, is, like we're always attracted to talking about the places we're going, but like, no, we're excited to be where we're at, working with the people that we're doing. And so out of the respect for that, we're not pointing to the next place we're going, and we're never leaving where we're at. Like we're so rooted in RDWC, and we have a lot of reverence for the other companies out there in the industry doing that. Like we're looking to grow our relationships with those companies and support one another. And so we're excited about that. And simultaneously, we see ourselves bringing to market in the coming decade what we feel like is going to be a very relevant approach to cultivation that could be disruptive, specifically as we see more regulatory pressures put on inbound, outbound waste streams, things like that, and just overall efficiency. I mean, what we're bringing to the table is something that necessitates no substrate, right? So cost of doing business goes down, efficiencies, and the devil's in the details. So TBD on how that makes an impact in the industry, but we're really excited about it.
And also from a sustainability point of view, we talked about it also. I think, we're doing business, but it's also important to, especially when you're dealing with water, to make sure that the water that you are using, when you finish using them, they will do good and not harm the environment. So I'm thinking there's something you also mentioned about filtration and dealing with the outbound water. So definitely for us, Growee, we also wanted to change that. And a lot of things for me changed in the past year. So I'm starting to look at things in a more relaxed way.
Oh, good.
Okay.
Yeah.
So in the beginning, everything is bad. Like everything is dramatic as an entrepreneur. as someone is in a distributor doesn't want to distribute your product, so immediately you think like, I'm gone. Nobody wants what I'm doing.
Right.
So everything is so dramatic. And then after a while, you, as you said, like there is the increments, there is the way, there's the path, and you need to figure it out, and it will work if you pour the hard work into it and build a good product, which is like the base. But I'm thinking having the ability to, and I'm allowing myself to say that, to dominate the RDWC field, but still keep innovating and introducing more system, it's something that is pretty unique.
Gosh, well, thank you. I mean, I would say what you guys are doing in terms of the value of water by maintaining it and keeping it healthy, that's an important part. Like you said, even if it's the outbound stream and whether or not you're remediating or you're just sending it to a drain, the way you treat it when it's in your possession, right, is a really important part of the process. And so one of the things that we've always valued in recirculating deep water culture is it just inherently does well with low EC. And so we're never populating the water with some overwhelming amount of anything, right? Yeah. And so, it's been something that we've had the fortune of benefiting from. And it actually then again, that kind of is what I speculate echoes into the quality of flower, right? So you're and
also to your pocket, like you're using half of the nutrients.
That doesn't hurt. So if you can be more mindful from a water standpoint, because we do, one of the bad things about water culture is if managed in I wouldn't call it more reckless way by any means, but hey, every 7 days I'm just flushing my entire system and I'm dumping all that water and then I'm putting in new water. It's just like, that's a little more slash and burn than we like to see. We're more, it's like, hey, you have a body of water, maintain that body of water, sure, purge something away every once in a while to get rid of the exudate. The use of automated dosing facilitates keeping water healthy. And so we see the most conservative water culture approaches are very rooted in the use of tools that are mindful. And so when you have a company behind it who is looking at it through that lens, like you guys have done, like, hey, that's part of the value that we bring is we want you to be conservative, save money in water, save money on fertilizers, save water, right?
Save time.
Yeah, and get a great outcome that you can repeat. So I think we see out there the companies that are participating in the water culture space are very mindful as well. Shout out to Hydro Unlimited right now. Those guys, we like what they're doing, and our guys at Hydro Bucket, and for that matter, different companies throughout the world, many of which we've had the pleasure of having some influence on. Like it's kind of it's an interesting feeling to kind of look abroad and see your design become ubiquitous.
Yeah.
You know, we probably have, I don't know if it's a dozen or more companies throughout the world we've inspired enough to where it looks like it, you know. And what we see, we you know, where we've evolved is we'd seen that as a threat before. We're like, wait, what are you doing? And now we see it as like, wow, what a great opportunity for us to work with them. Or like, I bet our cultured solution fertilizer, which is hands down the cleanest fertilizer on the planet,
and suitable for probably the only one or the best one suitable for this type of grow method.
Many would agree with you on that one. Yeah, you know, and so you know, that part of it, we see a lot of value. Like, let's go out and work with more people now, and it's less about it's more about being counterparts rather than counter to. You know, and so, I mean, exciting for us. We're about ready to launch into Europe. We've got a blending and bottling partner over there. Yeah, right. And so, obviously, the market is emerging over there. It's always been a place of innovation, and so we're looking forward to that. So, for you companies located in that part of the world, we're coming over there, and we want to work with you. You know, and we're looking forward to that. So, you know, if we're fortunate enough, we're going to find ourselves working more with you guys as time moves on.
Yeah,
you know,
I wish. I'm hoping that you will get to that point. And I think in your approach about partnership but many will consider competition. It's unique. Nobody's doing that. I think that for me, at least at the beginning, it's not that you are not securing the product, but you're not relaxed enough to be open-minded to talk to competitors in a way that is not competing.
Yeah.
And at least for me, so it took me several years to get into a point when I'm fine. Yeah, we can work together. We can do business together. We can be friends, although we are competing on the same market share. And so it took me a lot of time, psychologically, to get to that point. Was it for you like always?
I think part of what I'd like to say yes to that, whether or not that's exactly true. Certainly, as you're establishing yourself, your elbows are a little bit more poised, you know, and sharpened. But we've always kind of viewed there being benefits to conversations and collaborations. It's not always easy to identify others or enter into conversations where you can wade through the uncomfortable to get to the point, right? You know, and you know, one thing we've tried to always implement is a long game standpoint. You need to immediately succeed, right? Like from a bottom line, you know, like, hey, we need to be able to do payroll and, you know, meet payroll and bills and different things like that. But we're looking at a longer cycle, and the longer you're in business, the longer that cycle can be relative to what you're doing. So first year, a long game is just doubling that, right? You know, and then it's 2 years, and before you know it, you're like 5 years down the road. And the older you get, you know, the frames start to lengthen, and so that's part of where it's gotten clearer now as time's moved on, that like, gosh, it's really all about relationships and who we're choosing to do business with. We've done a lot of business over the years with maybe people we would not select to do business with now, you know, in the pursuit of doing business, and not necessarily because they're unsavory, but because we couldn't support that business well enough. You know, like if there are cultivators we've worked with and we weren't able to support properly, like that's not their fault. You know, everybody has to be accountable, but, you know, like that's really a big goal for us now, is just figure out how to be capable partners to the people who are investing to work with us. And, you know, and if we can't do that, but we're pushing the bottom line, it's like, I don't know, that kind of looks like a one-way street and not a long game. You know, it's like we are very fortunate to be 20 years into this and still have, I mean, some people may disagree, but we have a pretty good reputation in the industry, you know, and it's like, it's ours to lose, you know? And so it was like, hey, you can get a certain amount of the way, on kind of folklore and whatnot, but at some point the rubber's meeting the road and you're living off of your merit, you know? So I'm pleased and proud of still having, you know, the opportunity to work in the industry and grow, you know.
What did you think this industry changed a lot in the last, let's say, 10 years?
Yes. Yeah. And, you know, and in some cases, not for the better. I would say over the last 2 years, for the better. It's been the most challenging 2 years. I think I can speak broadly for other companies because we do interrelate, but there's a lot more professionalism and a normalized sense of business, right? And so it's no longer, gosh, we were here when it's the next tech industry and it's all this bull, right? It brought
2018.
Yeah, it brought everybody with fat pocketbooks that are going to get rich too, because that's what I do. And it was like, it was good for the bottom line, but it was not a savory time, And so now what I'm seeing is a lot more of the business savvy people who are really rooted in the industry, who are sustaining because they wanted to be doing it. And so like once it started getting difficult, they're like, I still want to do it. And so that's what's better about now. But it did lose some of the mystique and, kind of like the allure that, it's like when you figure out that there's a guy behind the curtain and it's not Oz or it's not magic anymore, but it also, again, opens up other opportunities and realizations. And that's where we're at now. We're just like, hey, this is a bunch of grown-ups in the room. We need to be doing things together. There's not a lot of sleight of hand you can get away with right now.
Yeah. In Israel, it's a little bit different, but I remember when I started doing hydroponics at the beginning. So I didn't know anything, so I went to a grow shop. We have also hydroponic shops in Israel. A little, not a lot, but and I remember back then, it has this, like you said, the mystique, the romantic feeling when you get into a shop and you don't have like a name on the door, just like a black door. Okay, and everything is kind of with black curtains. And you get inside and people are looking at you, like who you are, where are you from, what do you want, kind of look. And then everybody's growing strawberries.
And tomatoes.
As a code. And so I remember that at the beginning was 2016, I think, in Israel. So it was fun, be part of a kind of underground thing that is going on. And then when all the money started put in 2018 and 19, I remember I went to MJBizCon and I was there with a friend of mine who is an Israeli venture capitalist. And I remember I was thinking like, what a venture capitalist in this type of event. And this is where all the money started pouring in.
Yeah.
Everybody thought it's going to be, I remember they call it the green rush.
Yeah.
Right?
The green
remember
rush.
that?
Yeah.
So everybody was thinking about that and talking about that and article on Wall Street Journal and all of that. And eventually it's a plan that people are growing.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, you can make certain amount of money out of it. And as you said, if once everything is going down and the industry is going bad, the people that were looking for high returns and that you will get in high tech or other sectors, it's still agriculture.
It's difficult.
You need to remember that. There is that different pace to it.
Yeah.
And I didn't know that in the last couple of years it's becoming more about like the passionate people.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to hear about that. And what do you think will happen in the next 5 years?
Gosh, that's a great question. I feel like it's going to be more of what we're experiencing now, which is the people who are the best at what they're doing are succeeding. And so what we're anticipating and also seeing is the winners of markets are expanding, right? So the diversity, and this is true in the hydroponic stores, or it starts to thin, and unfortunately you lose a level of diversity in there, but the people who are good operators are operating more, so it may be in the sense that they're acquiring other people's grows or things like that, or they're expanding, and there's mixed feelings that people have about MSOs or multi-state operators and scale. But it's the nature of things. We see it here in the valley as far as farming. I mean, it used to be a lot of family farms, and it's a lot more corporate farming. Is that better? Whether or not, this gets back into being in your feelings a little bit about something. You may have a preference, but then there's the market, and so
there's the reality.
Yeah, I was just visiting greenhouse growers in Half Moon Bay that we have the pleasure of working with. They use our fertilizers. They grow, I think it's I think they're up to like 85,000 square feet.
Wow.
Right? Mm-hmm. And
in greenhouses.
Wow. And they grow what is considered indoor quality flower. They just they're good at what they're doing, right? Great microclimate where they're at, but it's difficult. I mean, it goes back to it's farming. Farming is hard. It's uncertain. It takes a lot of determination and resilience to go back to that, and then sometimes you're winning and sometimes you're not. So it's just like maybe anyone considering going into farming of any sort, including, all crops, need to ask themselves that, like, why am I doing this? Like, if this isn't working, do I want to work through it? And if you can't answer yes to those questions, you should consider some other option.
Well, how was it like growing up in a farm? You talk about
it was
farming.
hard. Yeah. What I'd say, like, I value that. And in fact, I have kids now. I'm fortunate to say I have a daughter, Hazel, who's 13, and a son, Satchel, who's 19, as of yesterday. And I wish that they could experience what I did growing up on a farm, because you're uncomfortable a lot. You have to work far more than you probably should. I mean, I was driving a tractor when I was 6, right? But it's like you get a point of reference that's difficult. And I don't know that there's any better primer for the world than difficult, right? And it can come in many different brands and styles. It's just like struggle is the primordial soup where success starts to be born, right? And it's cliche. Yeah. Like you have to learn from your failures and you do these things, but exactly. And so if you don't have that point of reference to know, like, difficult is where you need to be to succeed moving forward. And if you're in easy street, like, watch over your shoulder, So growing up on the farm helped ingenuity. It helped watch people struggle and work really hard, do everything right and still struggle. Nature, learn about those things. So yeah, that's, I think, what's helped give us a sense. I really value being a part of the providers to the cultivators, and we as a company revere what they're doing and respect how hard it is, and quite frankly, it's like, I don't know that I have the resilience personally to be able to go out there and do that. So that's kind of part of where, like, we slap the proverbial high five right now to them all, like, dude, you guys are doing it, And so if we can be a part of that success, there's nothing better.
Yeah, these guys are on the front line.
Oh my gosh.
Fighting the weather, fighting the pricing, fighting everything.
Yeah.
In Israel, at least, a lot of second generation and third generation farmers are moving to different areas. They don't want to continue. I got a good friend of mine. His family was passion fruit growers. Passion fruit for a long time, maybe 3 to 4 generations, something like that. And nobody will continue doing that, because he told me, like, you wake up, since you are a kid, you need to wake up in the morning early. You need to open the water. You need to take care of the farm. You need to learn how to drive a tractor when you're 6.
Yeah.
And doing reverse with how do you call it when you connect it to the tractor?
Like tractor trailer backing up.
Do reverse with the trailer when you're 6.
That's interesting.
And then it's too hard.
Yeah.
And the return is not that good, because you got seasons when you have weather problems. You get a season when you have employees problems.
Yeah.
And not a lot of people continue doing, like, traditional farming.
Yeah.
So I'm asking myself, looking like 100 years from now, do you think farming will remain? I don't know.
I certainly hope so, right? But to go back to all the variables that can undermine you in farming, that probably the most potentially discouraging and just like troubling is that you had a great year, do it again. Like, hey, that was it. It's just like, cultivation, you had a great crop, do that again. And then again and again. And then, hope the market continues paying you properly. I hope the regulatory doesn't undermine you. It's like, even when you're doing everything right, and this is when I'm the most distressed for people I see really just in life, is like when they're doing everything right and it's still not working. It's that's hard to watch, because you're just like, it goes back to, if you do hard work, or if you work hard and you do this and this, it's going to work out. And it's like, I don't agree. I'm not seeing that, And so this gets back to, and I'll kind of end on this, which would be, this is why it's so important for us to have relationships with other people, companies, and figure out, because it's through that support that you're going to be able to sustain through those times. If it's getting insights from somebody who you wouldn't have thought could give that to you because you have that dialogue open, or that has a resource that's useful for you, those are the intangibles. You're like, wow, don't burn bridges. It's like,
that's important.
Don't put, I would say this, don't compromise and put up with BS, like stand on your merits, but you can do that without torching relationships, because, we have point of reference where I'm glad that we've sustained relationships in some cases that I would have thought I could just throw out, and then down the road, you cycle back around and it's a different situation,
and different person.
And the world changes so much so quickly now, it's disruptive. And that's why I'd say, from an entrepreneurial standpoint, what's equality? Think about 5 years from now, and it's not, what do you want to be doing 5 years from now? Like, is what you're doing right now going to matter in 5 years? Super hard to know that. It used to be back in the day, like General Electric, which is a big company here in the US, they could have a 10-year product development cycle, because by the time they brought it to market, it was going to work. Like here, you better develop it pretty quickly, deploy it, and then be ready for that cycle to end, So I don't know. I think it's becoming increasingly difficult, but I also feel like the potential is super high for everyone who is passionate about something.
Do you think the home grower sector will remain in 5 years? Because a lot of people were telling me, why do you need to be in home grower when you can just go and buy? Doesn't matter what, but and I was always under the impression that it's more about passion and less about ROI or pricing and all that. And I'm just interested to see what you think about it.
Yeah, I probably lack meaningful insights on that. But what I would say is I do believe that it will remain a factor. So if you looked at something like the reef tank industry, right? Nobody's harvesting sashimi out of their reef tanks, but there's a ton of people that spend money doing it because it's something that they care about. I think the change that we've seen over the last 10 years is it used to be a way of an income. Like there was a lot of people, who like that was their way of life. Is it didn't have to be a big grow, but I have a grow and I have a certain group of friends and I that part has become disrupted. What's circling it back is that because of taxation, because of other maybe barriers, going into a dispensary and walking out with something that you feel good about can be difficult. In the form of flour, right? Gosh, there's everything under the sun, extracts, things like that. But as far as a quality flour, I don't think that's where you're going to find it. And if you do, you're not getting the value from it that you could if you were to invest your time. If you're passionate about it, do that. Like stay on that path. And it's not so that, because it's like anything, there's a die off of what used to be. I used to be able to do this. I used to get X amount of dollars this, and I was able to do these things. And it's like, well, when that's not the case, are you still interested in that garden?
Mm-hmm.
Those people are still gardening. The people who are like, yeah, I do this for these reasons, and the best flowers coming from those places. You know, it's like, you know, and that's why I believe it'll continue on, because A, people do things just for the sake of doing them, a la the reef tank, and B, there is still a pursuit for the finest flower on the planet, and that is not coming.
People love the
craft. Then that's not coming from MSOs.
No,
no disrespect to them, but that economy of scale does not make sense. It doesn't support that quality. It's not. It doesn't make sense. You know, so I think there will continue to be that. And also, the last thing I'd add to that is that it's regional. That pocket of opportunity continues moving around the world. Like right now, look at Germany's about ready to embark on a brand new cycle, you know, and you have a neighbor over here in the Netherlands that's just like, yeah, I don't think so, you know, and so and that may change in cycle. So, you know, who knows what
nobody knows what.
Yeah, who knows what's in store for us. But at the end of the day, like, we're interested in continuing being a part of the conversation, and we value that. Like you said, you know, have a level of appreciation. We are very appreciative when it comes to that.
So I think I need to go to the airport.
I think you do. Well, and you know what, you took.
It was so the time just flew by. You know, we were planning to have a conversation for 30 minutes, but it was just an amazing time just hearing from you.
Yeah, it was a good conversation. Well, thank you for taking the time to come out here and talk. You know, I mean, it's like you're all the way. I don't know how many miles that is for you. What are you, 4,500 miles away from home right now?
Yeah, I have no idea.
Some sort
I measured in
kilometers. Yeah, whatever that is. We don't do metric here.
Yeah.
But so I mean, taking the time to come out here and have conversation and network, this is a part of the goodwill that I think is going to make, you know,
it's a small industry in the end.
It's going to make things better.
And in a small industry, I think we need to know each other, have an open dialogue with each other, and also support each other. So a few years ago, I kind of noticed that, you know, this is the people that I'm going to work with for the next 10 years. So, and we can become friends.
Yeah. We need to celebrate each other. Yeah. You know, hey, shout out to everybody out there. Dude, give props to one another. And I think that happens a lot, but just continue doing that, because again, it's like, it's difficult to make it just on a personal level for families out there. So it's just like, give love to one another and support, you know, that quite often is the small thing that helps someone get through a difficult time. And so the more we can do that, and it doesn't cost money to do that.
No,
it doesn't cost money.
And you will get a return.
Yeah.
You said karma.
Well, yeah.
You give, you will get back. So it was amazing times. And Daniel, thank you so much for sharing your insights. And so I hope I will see you again.
Yes,
are you coming to MJ Bisque this year?
I will be roaming around that place. Okay, absolutely. Okay. Yeah. So we'll see you there. And thanks again for the conversation. It was fantastic. I'll look forward to the next one.